Good morning, business owners. It's your business savvy CPA, Mike Bosma, coming to you from Studio B, the new studios on the Bosma Business Center, not Studio A, Studio B for Bosma, of course, Bosma on Business. Each every Saturday, 60 minutes of action-packed business adventure. I had the privilege of talking to today's guest, and I started getting an idea of what this guy does, and you're going to want to stay tuned. You want to get your pencil out, notebook, and pay attention on today's Solomon Bosma on Business. We're going to talk about the holy grail of selling your business, being able to do it without paying taxes. This makes my heart happy. Brandt Brereton from Perpetuate Capital. Brandt, welcome to Bosma on Business.
Thank you very much, Mike. Great privilege and pleasure.
So I guess give us a little bit of background. How'd you get into the ESOP business?
So I started my investment banking career literally the very first day was the crash of 87. And so that was painful and eye-opening and I would say very, very helpful in terms of assessing risk over the course of my career. There's a lot of young guys that haven't experienced that kind of thing in their career yet. So it's valuable. But anyhow, I left Kidder Peabody in the mid-90s. My dad and I started a little boutique investment banking firm back then, and it was really just selling private companies to public companies, because at that point, in 95, you could count on two hands how many private equity groups were even in existence around the whole world. So anyhow, have over the last 40 years sold tons of companies to public companies and private equity groups, and then became really passionate about 15 years ago on the ESOP structure when taxes went up under Obama and valuations went down. I said, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be interested in saving taxes on their sale proceeds, given the whole baby boomer demographic. And so did the deep dive at that point.
So you got into it first day on the job, the crash of 87. Yay.
Yeah.
And then get through that and say, hey, this ESOP, now ESOP, for the benefit of our listeners, employee stock ownership plan, is where some very large, notorious, or I guess very noteworthy, I should say, companies that are ESOPs. But one that comes to mind the most is like Winco. Winco is a grocery store chain owned by the employees, made millionaires out of box boys.
Yeah.
That's right. So I think that's where you get a lot of loyalty in that. And I think, but a lot of times just people don't understand the nuances of an ESOP, and
Yeah.
I'd probably say, for the benefit of our listeners, if I had a demographic for if somebody wants to sell, business owner's been doing this for 30 or 40 years, they want a big fat check, and then they don't want to participate anymore.
Right. Right.
Pay me my money. I'm tired. I'm done. Right. Let somebody else take this thing on. Maybe, give me some dynamics of what it looks like, because not every company is a good candidate to be an ESOP, right? You can be too small or too large. So and that's right. I'd say, well, let's put it this way. A lot of people listen to the show, their demographic is they make about $1 million a year and they're worth about $3 million. Is that a good candidate for an ESOP?
If they've got at least, 25 to 30 employees, I would say yes. I think maybe makes more sense than first, at least, before I jump into sort of criteria set, is dispelling the biggest misconception of all. And I was guilty of this myself before I really understood the ESOPs. Mm-hmm. People think that the employees are actually buying the company. They're not. People think that the employees have to have money or intent.
Right.
And nothing could be further from the truth. It's real. It's like a family. We have a family trust, all of us. We put our assets in that trust. The kids and the grandkids are the beneficiaries. They can't make buy-sell decisions in the accounts. They just get money from the trust the way the trust agrees. That is exactly the way the ESOP works. So the employees have no enhanced rights, no say in the operations of the business. They just get to vest into the dollar value of the stock that was sold to the ESOP. So that's the first thing I think you'd have to get clear in everybody's mind, because otherwise you just turn off.
Right. Yeah, because that's where that's a lot of people. There's I'm a fan. I'm a student of scaling your business. Generally, I'd probably say, egads, there's probably less than 1% of all businesses that ever make it to 30 employees. I think it's actually like 0.5%.
I
by
believe
rev,
that. Yeah.
right? So because if you were to read Vern Harnish's book Scaling Up, all those things, you'd learn that being able to get through these plateaus, one person can manage so many people,
Right.
and then you need management and layers. You interviewed Brandt, a lady yesterday. She retired from Microsoft and was looking for her next thing. And after talking to her for an hour, I still couldn't understand what she did. Nice lady. I'm trying to help her okay, what's your next chapter going to be? I'm like, what did you do? I think I asked her like 10 times, what did you do? Like, well, I just did stuff. I'm like, your corporation's big enough, like Microsoft. You hire people. Oh, you can do stuff? Yeah, okay, just do stuff. It's kind of hard to get a career trajectory out of that once you retire.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
So to really answer your question, I would say, if somebody's got like $1 million, $1.5 million of EBITDA, growing, ideally relatively predictable revenue and earnings, and 25, 30 employees, they are in the strike zone. They're on the edge of the strike zone, but they're in the strike zone. They can get the deal done.
Yeah. And I think that's where, when we talk about multiples, we'll talk about actual multiples on the next segment. But when first off, who does this apply to? Then how does the thing work? I guess that's what everybody wants to know. Like, okay, so I sell the company. Who am I selling it to? If I'm selling it to my ESOP.
Yeah.
By selling it to myself, you said I'm not selling it to the employee. So what's the entity that buys it?
Yeah. So it's an employee stock ownership plan, employee stock ownership trust, or I sometimes will call them employee trusts, all interchangeable terms. It is at once a corporate finance trust that buys the stock rather than a third party or fund buying the assets or the stock from the seller. It's a trust that the employees are the beneficiaries of, the dollar value of, and that trust borrows money from debt sources, us included, and then that money is used to buy the stock from the selling shareholders.
Because that's where I think a lot of people get stuck, Brandt, is the trust. It's a newly formed trust, right, for the benefit of the employees, but it doesn't have any money.
Right, exactly.
So let's just say for fun, I have a company that is trending at $2 million a year in EBITDA. Like I said, recurring revenue, it's predictable. It's not all baked around the owner. But if the owner goes, there's still going to be a business there. And I ain't going to sell it for $10 million. Sell it to $10 million for the trust. The trust doesn't have any money. You mentioned the employees don't have any money. So where do they get the money from? They can borrow some of it, but they're not going to borrow all of it.
Yes. Imagine a 3-layer wedding cake. We'll call that the capital stack. Top layer is a bank, any bank that understands ESOPs. All the major ones do. And so they're going to look at that company and they're going to loan against the balance sheet and the cash flow no differently than they would loan to any other company. It's going to be collateralized, maybe a little bit of cash flow stretch, but not a lot. They've got to have their collateral support, and they're going to lend that money at prime and plus or minus, 100 basis points. And so and by the way, historically speaking, that was the only source of liquidity in an ESOP transaction. So I told you, think about a 3-layer wedding cake. Historically, it was a 2-layer wedding cake. The bank and then the seller had to carry back a note for the difference. And so while he's going to get the same valuation he would get if he sold to a private equity group by selling to the ESOP, he's not going to get the same amount of cash at close. And so that's why most people, frankly, didn't do it.
Well, because they're like, because they want 100% of the cash out.
Of course.
And so in my example, like in the olden days, how they used to do it, Brandt, how much would the seller carry beyond a $10 million deal? How much would the bank finance versus the seller?
I would say he might get $2 to $3 million upfront in senior debt, and the rest is going to be carried in the seller note.
Right. So in a $10 million deal, best case, you're going to get $3 million in cash, and then roll the dice if the company continues and get $7 million. So you're like, yay, right? It's making $2 million a year. It's a year and a half of earnings. I could have been even. I still own the company.
Correct. Right? Yeah. And so for years, I have thought and finally been blessed to come across partners. And we've all saw the problem from the same perspective and said, there needs to be a custom debt fund that thinks like equity risk decisions, but is not trying to buy one single share of the stock or go on the board or tell them what to do. It's like the antithesis of private equity. But contort that loan or contort that equity risk decision into debt, be subordinate to the bank, no collateral, bet on the team, bet on the cash flow, and lend that money, like the bank, to the ESOP. And so the sum, now you got 3-layer winning cake: bank, us, seller note holder. The sum of 1 and 2 up above, generally speaking, is going to equal the amount of cash that guy would get if he sold to a private equity group. So now, game
now
changer.
It's kind of, there's parity, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'll just backfill that, Brandt, because I think it's important. Because again, I was doing our own tombstones for the deals we've closed for the last going on 5 years, and we're over 80 transactions in 5 years.
Wow, it's great. Congratulations.
Very blessed. Just, people get it. They're like, okay, how do I sell my business, get it ready to be sold, get all the buyer stuff out of it, and then, not give it all to the government once you sell it. So
exactly.
And private equity is just a great solution for that oftentimes, because there's a lot of companies that are too small to be, that's probably the benefit or maybe the detriment of Sarbanes-Oxley. It's very expensive to be a publicly traded company. And so that generally means you've got to be a very large company to be publicly traded. Not a lot of small cap public companies out there anymore. So now what has filled in is private equity. Private equity, traditional private equity deal. I can sell it to, if I sold it to, Joe on the street, get 100% of my cash, and I can walk away. But I inform people, I advise them all the time, don't let the seller off the hook that easy. They need some skin in the game. So like, I'm a big proponent of a 10% equity roll, or equity, or seller financed. And then just to make sure for that, at least that first year, the seller doesn't run out and leave you hanging, right? So you got
you got to protect.
And now private equity steps in. They're like, hey, we'll give you 20% equity in the new deal, and then we'll move on. So when we come back, I get Brandt Brereton from Perpetuate Capital. We're talking about ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans, and then how they work, how they get funded, you as the seller, how you're going to get cash out, and then we're going to make it whole because you're not going to pay any tax on it. When we come back, it's called Bosma on Business.
I was born with a congenital heart defect and almost died. But thanks to research funded by the American Heart Association, I had heart surgery that saved my life. Learn more at helpheart.org.
Welcome back to Bosma on Business. Your host, Mike Bosma. Out of studio, Brandt Brereton from Perpetuate Capital. Brandt, we've done this show for like 13 plus years, all from the studio, Cumulus Studio down in Reno. And whether, so it's always from in the studio. It's just a different studio. Now, Studio B for Bosma Business Center. So I was not in studio, not on the phone, but on video. So, of course, if you're listening or watching this show, I would encourage you to go to our YouTube channel. That's Bosma on Business on YouTube. Please, for the love of everything holy and good, subscribe. I'll pay you $1. I don't know. Just we're very blessed. I think 6 weeks ago we started at 0. We started the channel, and we're up almost to 400 subscribers. But the holy grail, evidently, in this world, Brandt, is 1,000. So
I didn't know that.
Got to get to 1,000. But actually, it's really interesting now, because I'm starting to look at people that do these things, on video. There's a ton of hacks out there, Brandt. It is scary, the stuff that people. There was a guy that he was, he kind of ponytail, t-shirt, he had a whiteboard. Oh, if you just put your money in an offshore trust, you don't have to pay any taxes. And I'm like, so.
Yikes.
I put a comment on it, and he has like 68,000 subscribers. I'm like, they're just drinking the punch every day. I'm like, oh my gosh, IRS, shut this guy down.
Wow.
So I put a message in there, and I said, if you're on here and you're saying, yeah, please let me know how this works, I want you to go to ChatGPT right now. And I gave him the prompt. I said, I gave him the prompt to put in to tell him that this guy was full of kahooey, even though I didn't want to say it because I don't want to get in a lawsuit. But I'm like, if you just put in this prompt, it'll tell you why this doesn't work. Crazy, right? So I thought if we can take this to the masses and actually give them content, not BS, not trying to sell them a bill of goods, like in this case, Brandt, with you, you're the holy grail, you're the cat's meow, you're the real deal on how to do an ESOP, right? The no BS ESOP guy. Right? One of the tops in the country. So it's like, hopefully this is the user's guide for you want to know how this thing works, the ins and outs, the good, the bad, when it works, when it doesn't, go to that YouTube channel because there it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
So, but that's where we're talking about, how this thing works, how it gets financed. So now my favorite part of it is taxes because, I got in, to the investment banking / business brokerage thing because I could see that nobody in this space understands tax.
Yeah, that's right.
Just pay your taxes. Be happy. You're only paying 20%. What are you complaining about? Well, you live in the great state of California. That's 33.3%. You wonder why California said 13.3? It's so that when you add that to your 20% capital gain, it's exactly a third.
Yeah.
No coincidences here. So talk to me about, I sell it to the ESOP. How do I get taxed on that thing?
So Wall Street has, let me back up. 1030, most of your guys understand 1031 in real estate. Right. A little farther, a couple paragraphs down in the code is section 1042. And what it says is that if you sell your stock in your company to an employee stock ownership plan, and within 12 months, you reinvest those sale proceeds into U.S. stocks and bonds, you get the same treatment. The basis steps up, the capital gains tax goes away. That's great. However, you pointed out in the previous segment that, you're not going to get 100% under any circumstances, right. Private equity or ESOP, you're not going to get 100% liquidity when you make that sale. So Wall Street has figured out, and it's an interesting story, William Simon, the former Treasury Secretary, bought for his own account, I think it was either Avis or Hertz, I can't remember what it was, back in like the 70s. And right when these laws came out, and he sold it, I think it was Hertz, or Avis rather, sold Avis to an ESOP. And he went to all of his buddies on Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, Kidder Peabody, where I used to work, and said, look, you guys, there's these new rules, but I don't want to have to be invested in the U.S. stocks and bonds on the sale proceeds. You guys need to create a security for me and for sellers to ESOPs, which they did back in the 70s. And so now there's these instruments called floating rate notes. So most people understand how a corporate bond works, where it's a fixed interest rate. The value fluctuates every moment based on the interest rates and supply and demand. Right. So they designed a 50-year bond, corporate bond, and these are issued by big AAA rated corporations. Think 3M, FedEx, these kinds of companies. And that bond has a variable interest rate that resets every 90 days. So that plus there's a put option. I know I'm getting technical, but there's a put option in that bond where if you own that bond, you can sell it back to the issuer at par. So those two design features make this 50-year instrument extremely stable in pricing so that the margin department will lend up to 90% against it with no personal guarantees. So now you sell that $10 million company. In our case, you got $6 or $7 million cash at close. You're only carrying back a note for $3 million. And if you take 10% of the sale proceeds, or $1 million, they'll loan you $9 million with that bond as the only source of collateral, no personal guarantees. Now you have checked the box once and for all. You have purchased a U.S. stock and bond for $10 million. And now all the cash that you got at close and all your note payments that come in, except for the interest income, is tax-free.
Right.
Forever.
Which is
huge.
Right. So that's where you can say, okay, I can sell it for 10, and then after tax, let's say I live in California or a high tax state.
Yeah.
Best case, I'm going to have $8 million left. Worst case, I'm going to have, $6.7 million. You're going to take a third of it. You're like, oh, okay, well, hey, I can do this. Basically keep the 10.
Exactly.
Right.
So you either flush a third to the government, never to be seen again, or you hand it down to your kids. It's really that simple.
Right. And that's where the thing that I love about this strategy is because we talk to people every day. It's like that demographic. I got, 12 to 15 employees. I'm making a great life. I make $1 million a year. And, my business is worth $3 million-ish. And I'm like, well, maybe, and they're like, but they're going to take so much of it, right? Because if I only get $3 million at close, and then I give a third of that away, I got $2 million left. That's not a lot of money. Sounds like
Yeah.
but believe me, it's not. So you're like, well, oh, you mean I could go out and buy a company just like me? This is the magic. I got to buy a company just like me, and so now I have $2 million of EBITDA and 24 to 30 employees, and now I can sell for 5 times cash flow, right? So now I got 10. So basically, you take your $3 million company, you pay another 3, it's 6, and then the day you close, you're worth $10 million. You just made $4 million, right?
Not only
not
only that, we'll help finance it using an ESOP structure, and the guy that you acquired doesn't have to pay tax on his sale proceeds.
Right. And as a seller, what do you care who you sell it? And actually, you're selling it to your employees. This is the best thing ever, right? So, and that's where I think, having this structure baked, having this layer of the second layer of the cake, as Brandt said, is something that's really innovative and relatively new to the market, and something that everybody should have on their radar, I should say. So, speaking of the radio, when we come back, I got Brandt Brereton for Perpetuate Capital. We're going to do a little bit deeper dive, some of the governance and how the ESOP works post-close. You heard it here and only here. It's Bosma on Business.
In life, things aren't scripted.
If you're an athlete, we need people like you and translate those skills to officiating.
You can get a lot out of it.
It happens in every town, in every game.
We never have a perfect game, but the rewards always outweigh the negativities.
Welcome back to Bosma on Business. Your host, Mike Bosma. Brandt Brereton for Perpetuate Capital, giving us the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of how an employee stock ownership plan works. Now, Brandt, when I've looked at this for clients in the past, the sticky wicket is valuation and then running the thing post-close, right? Because it's not like your business that you owned, Mr. or Mrs. Business Owner. You were the chief cook and bottle washer. You made all the decisions, and that's just not true with an ESOP. So Brandt, how does this thing works from a governance perspective?
It is and it isn't. So what I would say is that one misconception is that people think that the employees have a say in the operations of the business.
In my example, in the Winco, the courtesy clerk who bags the groceries or pushes the carts in, he doesn't have access to the corporate bank account and can't go up and start shouting out orders to everybody because I'm an owner. Yeah. It doesn't work that way.
No, he doesn't get to see financials. He doesn't. All he knows is he has an additional retirement plan that he's been blessed with. And, frankly, he'll believe it when he sees it. And once the first guy retires and they see that money, this is real.
This could be a thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you got to get past that. 1, 2, people oftentimes think that, well, gosh, there's nobody on my team that is smart enough to run this business like I can. And so what they forget is that like every other private equity group in the world does the following. Right? We go, you want to leave. We understand that. So that we go do a
executive
retained search. So we do the same exact thing in your circumstances. So, but to answer your question, so it is possible, legal, and very, very common for somebody to sell all or part of their stock to the ESOP. I always start with all because that's the most tax efficient way to do it. Right. And notwithstanding that, you can, if you want, continue to work for the corporation for salary and bonus. But more importantly, the sellers retain control, voting control of the board of directors. So if it's a two-person husband and wife or two-person board now, then what you have to do is, in terms of sort of, best practices, is bring an independent director on. Right. Which is to say, not an employee, not a family member. But if there's 3-person board, you and your wife, the two are always going to carry every motion before the board. And so you have that voting control of the board going forward. Now, you are fiduciaries of a retirement plan, just like most of these people are now with the 401k. But it's enhanced, right? I mean, you have to make sure that plan's, you have to hire a TPA firm. You should make sure that it stays in compliance. But other than that, it's really not crazy at all.
Well, and that's what's interesting, Brandt, because I'm a fan, right, for the seller to give up control once he sold the company, right? If you've got most of the money you're going to get out of the transaction, I understand. Don't mess it up until I'm paid. Fair.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you've basically cashed out, what do you care, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller? Let's hire somebody. Let's get some hired guns in here that can do it way better than you. They're professionals. Get them on the board, right? The company will be better for it, right? I mean, it just will be.
Generally speaking, that's the case. And what's unique is that when every transaction will have a seller note. It's just that it's going to have a much smaller seller note if we're involved. Attached to that seller note are penny warrants. Think of it as like public company stock options. You have the right to buy 10, 15% of the company for $1, literally $1 total,
right,
and then sell it. And it's a future appraised value. That gain stacked on top of the interest rate that you got under seller note gets you a market-based return for financing that strip of the bottom layer of the cake.
Bottom layer, yeah, the cap stack. So, but that's where people have to get their minds right. They've been running it, and then that's what I do, as a business broker, is help you like, okay, you're going to walk away from this thing, but you're going to still care because you need this thing to be successful after you sell. But you can't be the control freak. You've got to be able to train your brain to say, okay, now I have to think like a fiduciary, and what's in the best interest for the company, not what's in the best interest for you individually.
Yeah.
And so we try and align those things so that what's good for the company is also good for the seller.
The benefit is that he can throttle that on his timeline rather than somebody else's timeline in this scenario. But if somebody's just trying to get as much cash as they can possibly get at close, taxes be damned, I'm out of here. ESOP's probably not a great, unless we can pre-identify who's going to run that company and step in the next 6 months. Then it could be a fantastic solution.
Well, yeah, and that's where I don't even know if you know this about our firm, Brandt, but we brought on executive search 2.5 years ago.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, so that's where, because it's very common where about half of our 80 deals have been private equity. Very common that the company was basically built around the owner. We identify that early. Her name's Colleen Morrison. She's a rock star based out of Austin, Texas. She's placed, like, we've done 80 transactions. She's placed 50 people in 3 years.
Wow, that's fantastic. Do you guys, I can't remember, do you have a wealth management arm?
We do. Right.
Okay. Yeah. So for clients that go down this ESOP path and don't want to pay taxes of the sale proceeds, you guys can help them with that whole 1042 strategy. That's great.
No, that's it. Right. So that's where soup to nuts, right? Because otherwise, in fact, I have this right now. I had a guest on the show, a great entrepreneur, but she's already hired a large stockbroker to help her. She's expecting an 8-figure exit. It's like pulling teeth to get anything done because all they're doing is protecting their future, $10 billion, right? I'm like going, just stop it. Stop, in order for her to save $100,000 in taxes, we were going to put $300,000 into her defined benefit program. She's the only employee of this company, right? Before you hire employees, this is when you want to do this, and you can vest everybody else out of it. Yeah. But right. They're like, oh no, we're only going to do, I'm like, then now they're getting a haircut on the qualified business income. I'm like, well, you guys are you're costing your client hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just shut your pie hole. You don't know what you're talking about. Right. Yeah,
just bad misaligned incentives. Sure. I would tell your listeners that they need to be clients of your firm, first of all, and second of all, if they're going to sell, that they look at you for the entire solution set here, because you want an integrated solution and not people pointing at each other's.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And I'm good. Get a second opinion. I mean, I give second opinions all day, every day to people. Kind of like, I think this is shaky. I go, I think you're right. And this is
that's right.
They're not going to tell you. The salesperson gets a big fat commission. They're not going to tell you where the problems are. My job. I'm a CPA. I'm a fiduciary. Right. When the wealth advisor, we're registered investment advisors. We're a fiduciary. Keystone Wealth Advisors. We're a fiduciary. Like, we're going to tell you the truth, even if it's to our detriment. So, and the goal is, do the ESOP, not do the ESOP. You want to make sure that you don't regret what you did. That's, getting all the information so you're not with the benefit of hindsight, like, what did I do? But real quick, Brandt, I need to talk about it because one of the things that's going to help pay for this thing is that ESOP is very tax efficient.
Yes.
From operations, right? How does that work?
It's crazy. So When you sell 100% of your stock to the ESOP, the earnings engine that is the corporation stops paying taxes entirely and permanently. And everybody's like,
What?
ETF, how
What?
in that world could that happen?
Right.
So you know how in an LLC or an S corporation, which most companies are, there's no tax at that corporate level. The taxable
Goes to the
income
owner,
flows through to the shareholders, right? And so if you've sold all your stock to an ESOP, you're an S corporation, which is nirvana in ESOP tax land, and there's that owns all that stock, which is a retirement plan that doesn't pay taxes. So that is how thousands of companies like Winco down the street legally stop paying tax on the profit engine every year.
Right. And that's why they make sense from an investment perspective. People like you, Perpetuate Capital, other, Wall Street banks are going to say, if we're not paying tax, normally a third of this money goes to taxes. And now I know I have that much margin for things to change, and I'm fine.
Safer
company.
Yeah.
I have, instead of lending to some, wild west cowgirl entrepreneur is going to do whatever they're going to do, and I may or may not get repaid. Now these same people have fiduciary duties ascribed to them, where now they have personal liability if they mess it up, right? If they're self-dealing, that falls to that person. So that's where there's a lot of safeguards in it for the benefit of getting the creditors repaid. And that's basically, you can repay the creditors just with the tax savings, right? So this thing is turbocharged from an investment perspective.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's really remarkable that more people don't take advantage of the laws that already exist.
Well, and because I'd say the reason why though, Brandt, is it's that prototypical company. They're making $1 million or worth $3 million. They're not a candidate for this thing because they're all built around the entrepreneur. So that's where, we take a long view. We're like, hey, let's take 2, 3, 4, 5 years and build you up into a company that you can then triple your net value and do it very tax efficiently. And then we didn't even talk about the second bite at the apple. Now this is fun because what Brandt said earlier about the warranty you get, because for carrying the seller financing on it for that little slice, and I think we're talking about $1 million on a $10 million deal. Okay, fine. But then you're still working for the company. You still have a salary, right? You're on the board.
If you want, or if you don't want, be replaced. Yeah.
But the thing is, now you're probably the highest paid person in that organization. You're going to have the lion's share of getting the benefit for the ESOPs. And who buys up these companies? Big publicly traded companies buy up these companies, right? Because now they're not saddled with taxes. They pay off the debt. Now they can grow like crazy, right? And then they get to a certain size where they're very attractive to a public company. And then they buy them. This whole big amount of cash or stock goes into the public trust or to the employee employee stock ownership plan, or that trust that you're an owner of. So you still tax-free. It's tax-free, right?
Yeah.
So this is how this works. All right. So Brandt, that was great. I think that's everything I want to hit. When you come back, there's 2 things you got to do for me, brother. 1, you're going to tell me the number 1 thing you wish you knew when you got into this business. And 2, you're going to talk about, and it's a short segment, so let's be quick, about how your faith weaves, through the entirety of the above. When we come back, we call it Bosma on Business.
What if you had some money waiting for you at the IRS? Money you could use to fix up the house, tune up the car, get a little something for the family, or save for a rainy day. If you worked and didn't make much money last year, find out about the Earned Income Tax Credit at irs.gov. It makes life a little easier.
Welcome back to Bosma on Business. Your host, Mike Bosma, in studio or on video with Brandt Brereton from Perpetuate Capital. Talking, as we close out the segment about what are the things that we wish we would have known? The number 1 thing, the big aha, the big takeaway. So when you got into this ESOP space, kind of did the investment bank thing, jumped over to ESOP, and we all, in practice, we all are learning as we go. What thing do you think is going to be most beneficial for our listeners to know before they jump into the ESOP space?
I wish I would have known. I wish I would have thought about the middle layer of that wedding cake 10 years ago, 12 years ago, because I put so many people into the ESOP structure, and they're great, very successful transactions. But for every one that I put in, there were 5 that I pitched, explained, and they sold to private equity because they needed to get a certain amount of cash at close. Right. And had I known that there was a way to do it legally, structurally, financially, market return based, it would have been a totally different story. So the biggest takeaway for anybody listening is if private equity groups are talking to you and it's somewhere deep down in your gut, you have this dissonance about wanting to perpetuate the unique culture of the business. Not everybody's that way, but if you are, then you ought to get an analysis, give you an analysis that says, here's what the private equity transaction will be to you quantitatively and qualitatively, and here's what you can do in ESOP. Now you can compare and think and actually pray in a more informed way.
No, that's a good feedback. And as we've kind of land this plane for the show, you're a man of faith. That, I see it, in all of your media. How has faith impacted this journey for you?
Yeah, God benched me from investment banking about 10 years ago because I had my head in my butt about money. And he put me inside of a ministry for 2 years, which I did not want to do. Kicking and screaming, did I go do that? But it was the best thing that ever happened because it was like a rotary through my heart. Rather than me trying to get God clear on my agenda, he got me really clear on his agenda. And then I was released back into investment banking, corporate finance, with just a totally different perspective on what I'm supposed to do with what God has given me in the time that I have remaining on earth. And that is help owners of purpose-driven companies. Doesn't have to be Christian, but purpose-driven companies. And it could be environmental. It could be any number of purposes behind the purpose-driven company. But if you run a purpose-driven company and you want to see that legacy perpetuated, but you don't want to make a sacrifice in terms of cash at close, there is a much better way to do it. And I think it has to do with Perpetuate Capital structuring and financing and transacting so you get the same amount of cash at close, and having your firm handle all of the other aspects of the transaction, including that wealth management going forward and HR replacements, all those things.
No, I appreciate that. No, and like I said, I appreciate you sharing your journey. I think those are things that, the feedback I get on the show is people sharing kind of their heart, their, kind of the real motivation for what they're doing, and that you're a purpose-driven company. You want that to continue after you sell, right? And because you built something, it's a big chunk of this, the founder's life is baked into this business. And this ESOP strategy is a way to continue that rather than selling out to Wall Street.
That's right. That's
how it
right.
works.
And you can always downstream sell to Wall Street
Yeah.
if you got it wrong or you don't you change your mind.
You still have options.
You're not prevented from selling
Absolutely.
to a third party downstream, but there's a better way to go into it.
No, Brandt, thank you so much for coming and sharing your journey. Of course, if there's anything newsworthy, make sure you ping me. We'll get you back on. Speaking of getting back on, next week on Bosma on Business, Adrienne Wilkerson, fellow Inc. 5000 award recipient and founder of Beacon Media, is going to talk about her insights she's got a marketing company recognized nationally, and she's scaling like crazy. She's going to bring her journey and some tidbits and tips on next week's installment of Bosma on Business. Next week, my brothers, my sisters, my comrades in arms, keep that business engine humming. We call it Bosma on Business.